Good evening, good evening. Welcome. Welcome to everyone. Welcome to Evanston Live TV. Welcome, welcome. I see a lot of familiar names there. We are also live on YouTube as well. So feel free to text friends, share the YouTube link for Evanston Live TV. And feel free to text them to join us if they have questions right here on Zoom. We have an amazing lineup and we're going to get started right now. So if everyone would please remain muted until we open up for questions. This is for the residents. It's all about educating, and I'm going to be learning a lot here tonight myself. So I am looking forward to this conversation with our guests. Someone just sent me, okay, great. All right, so here we go. Everyone ready? All right.
Ready.
Okay. All right. Hey, this is Malika of Evanston Live TV, and we got a lineup tonight. I am looking forward to this conversation. I cannot tell you how many times we've heard the word TIFs in council meetings, in forums, during the election here in Evanston, and you'd be surprised how many people don't know really what are TIFs? What does it mean exactly? What is the power of TIFs? How does it impact our homes, our household? What is the true meaning of TIFs? And what are the pros and cons of TIFs? Many people were the same way about FOIA. And thanks to then City Clerk Devon Reid, who is now Alderman of the 8th Ward, now we know all about FOIA. And it is because of our longtime resident who ran for 7th Ward Alderman, Mary Rosinski. She's a realtor. The woman knows zoning like no other. She knows her zoning. She is ready to educate everyone in Evanston all about TIFs. So this is going to be regular. It's going to be.
Actually, I've called on Tom to help do the education. I am trying to self-educate because it's been very hard to get a full picture of this. And I feel one thing that we don't have in Evanston, I'm hoping this will be the beginning of a number of real community conversations where we're not just presented with a plan, but we're presented with an opportunity to talk and say, well, this is working, this isn't working. But Tom has been studying, and I'll go, Tom, you're going to be next, but Tom's been studying TIFs and writing books and exposing the wherewithal. So you can do your introduction to Tim in Chicago. And I've been following Tom for a couple of years now, and he's phenomenal.
Yes. Well, thank you, Mary. She's already given the introduction to Tom Tresser, who is our special guest tonight. This is his first time to the show. Welcome, Tom Tresser. Welcome. From what I've read about you, you are the civic educator, and you know the ins and outs of TIFs, and that's what we are here to discuss. We also have 2 aldermen who will be joining in the discussion. Evanston Alderman Bobby Burns of the 5th Ward. Bobby, you with us? Make sure.
Yes. I'm in the house. I'm in the house.
Alderman Burns is in the house. And we have Alderman Devon Reid of the 8th Ward, also an educator. We've got educators tonight, people.
Yes.
Welcome, Reid. Welcome.
And I am not in the house. Hello.
Hello. We can hear you.
I actually yes. Just saying hi. Great, glad to be here. Looking forward to discussing TIF with Tom and Mary and Bobby, and I think we'll all have some things that we share about with TIF, and I think we'll all have some disagreements about TIF. And
Well, we're listening.
Devon, you're going in and out. Last we heard is we will have some agreements and some disagreements.
Dialogue and looking forward to it.
All right. Yes, I think this is.
Yes, then we can end it. Yeah, we'll have some agreements and disagreements, and I'm looking forward to the dialogue.
Yes. I think you got a slight delay there, Devon. All right, so we're going to get started here, everyone. Tom, now, TIFs. Actually, I looked it up so I can read the definition because a lot of people don't know what TIFs are. Tax increment financing. So it's a public financing method used as a subsidy for redevelopment and community improvement. So break that down in real life. What does that mean?
Well, first of all, thank you, Malika, for bringing me into your show and into people's living rooms, and hope everyone on this call is well and safe and healthy. And as we open up, we just want to stay sane out there. So thank you again for inviting me to dialogue. So yeah, my name is Tom Tresser. I call myself a civic educator and public defender, but I'm not a lawyer. I don't play one on TV. It's about the word public. So people should know my bias, I guess, a little bit about, where I'm coming from is we at the Civic Lab, which is a nonprofit do tank for civic engagement and social justice, we value the word public very highly. So that's what you have to know. Everything that I say is going to be based on that lens. And we look at Chicago and civic politics through a racial justice lens. So we have to know how we got here. So it's not just looking at a program and just looking at it without context. We have to know a little bit about the history of the place and the space that we're talking about. And it's very true for TIFs. And so that's our bias, that we want to defend and lift up our public stuff, our public services, our public sector, our public spaces. So that's I don't know what you want to say, a bias or a point of view that informs our work. So we got into this looking at tax increment financing, or TIFs, as part of that stewardship of public stuff. And in this case, we're talking about property taxes. So, how your property taxes flow in your place is a big deal. And it will determine, I guess you could say, the health of your public stuff, your city, your public services, such as public education, public parks, anything that has the word public in front of it, right? So if before we get into the discussion of what a TIF is, it's important for people to realize that's what we're talking about. We're talking about your property taxes. So if everyone on this call is an owner, then you just remember, your property tax bill, or go to your desk and take it out and just look at the property tax bill and remind yourself of what are the units of government that the tax from your property funds. And like everywhere in America, the number one thing that your property tax funds is public education, right? In Chicago, it's about 60 cents of the dollar, but in Evanston, it might be a little higher. I think you guys would actually have the exact number.
67%, 67 cents.
67, yeah, that's what I thought. So it's almost, a little south of 70%. So that's kind of it's important to hold that high in your head as we get into this conversation. For $1 of property tax to go missing, there are consequences, right? And so that's my concern as someone who's concerned about the public space. All right. With that said, let's talk TIFs. So tax increment financing is a thing that was created in California in the late 50s. It came to Illinois in 1977, and it's a way to subsidize a private development in so-called blighted areas. But what does that mean? When we say that's a blighted area, or we say, Malika, you live in a blighted community, I don't think that's a compliment. If we say, Mary, your community is blighted, I don't think people appreciate that. But we have to ask, who blighted who? Now, I can't speak about Evanston, but I can sure speak about Chicago. And we can say that Chicago, the history of our community and how it's laid out and who lives where and who gets resources is a history of racism, right? So that's a reality that we have to start with when we talk about TIFs. So it's in the statute. We have to address the word blight, because that's what they use. So what the second thing that we have to talk about with TIFs is this idea that the market has fled, and that something that wants to be built in this so-called blighted area couldn't be done through normal financing. In other words, Tom Tresser wants to build a mall in the 5th district where Bobby is the representative. And I, Tom Tresser, want to build a little strip mall with a 7-Eleven or a dry cleaners or what have you, a flower shop, that sort of thing. And I go to the bank and I say, I'd like to build this little mall. And it's about $10 million to build this mall. I've got $5 million. I need a $5 million construction loan. The bank will say, Tom, that's a blighted community. That's a dicey community. Now, sometimes that's code for a community of color, or a poor community, or a working class community. There's just not a lot of wealth. So what does the bank say to me? Well, because that community is blighted, we got a problem in lending you money because it's going to be risky. Folks are poor there. They might be stealing from the stores. Your stores might be vacant. You see what I'm saying? This is the curse of the blight. So we can lend you the money, but it'll be at 25% interest because it's risky, they say. And I say, I can't afford that. If I took that money at your interest, I would be charging rates so high that nobody could afford to rent. I need some help. Is there any free money that would help me build my little mall in this so-called blighted community? And the answer is yes. If there's a TIF there, I can get up to 30% of the cost of this project.
That Illinois statute?
That's in the statute. Yeah, so the Illinois statute allows municipalities to create TIFs. You don't have to, but the statute gives you, the city of Evanston, the permission, just like it gives the city of Berwyn or the city of Chicago. And all the TIFs are within your city boundaries. So the TIFs of Evanston don't, overlap or touch the TIFs of Chicago, and so forth. So what happens is the law says, because we want this mall to be developed, it's a public good, people will help build it. So those are jobs. And then people will work in it, which is, jobs. And then people will come and have commerce, and they'll have services. So they'll have the flowers and the dry cleaning and the whatever, that's a benefit. So for that reason, we're going to give Tom Tresser Development, whatever that is, $3-4 million, whatever the proportion is to the whole project budget. Now, it's not a loan, but it's a gift. Now, what happens if my mall fails? So I open it up and I made bad judgment and it just fails and I have to sell it. It goes in receivership. Does Evanston get its money back? No, it's gone. What if it's a successful project and I sell it to Mary Rosinski's bank, and it cost me $20 million and I sell it for $40 million? Does Evanston get a cut of the profits? No, I keep it all. So what happens is the TIFs act as a bank for private developers, and the public good that's being offered would be that there are jobs being created, and that my mall will be now producing property taxes. So before, this blighted area, maybe it was an empty lot, or maybe it's an old car dealership, or whatever it was, right? Now it's got the little mall with the stores, and they're producing property taxes, whereas before there were none, or certainly very little. This is where the increment comes in. So I'm going to hold up this diagram that you may have seen many times. And what the blue at the bottom represents, that little blue bar, that's called the base, which requires a little bit of explanation. So for this TIF that they want to create in the 5th Ward, they drew some lines and they said, this is the dimensions of our TIF district that we wish to create. 2021. They count up all the properties inside the TIF district, and the county will tell you how much property taxes those properties are generating, like right now in the current year. That is called the base. So you see that? And what you want to notice about it is it's flat. So if all the properties in the 5/5 TIFs are producing, say, $1,000 of property tax, for argument's sake, when we start this process, you'll see that that rate is frozen for 23 years, right? The line is flat.
Does it have to be 23 years?
Yes.
Oh, so they can't go to 15 years or 10
No,
years?
it's 23. They can end it early if they want to, but it's 23. And they can extend it if they wish. So if those properties are pulling out $1,000 in property tax at the beginning of the TIF, 23 years later, the units of government that that you guys rely on to deliver services is getting the same $1,000. Now, what the little yellow triangle represents, that's the increment. So say now in year 5 of the TIF, 5 years from now, my mall is built, other things are built, property values have risen inside the boundaries of the TIF. And so now, instead of the $1,000, which was the base here, now it's $5,000 property tax is being collected. This is where the word increment comes in. The TIF collects the current value, which is in our example of 5,000, minus the base, which we said was 1, the increment being $4,000. So that's how much money goes into the TIF piggy bank. Okay, the city of Evanston and the county of Cook and the Board of Ed and all the other groups on your property tax bill still look at that 1,000 that they got 4 years before from all those properties, but not a penny more. And so on every single year, they do this process. So it's now, say it's 20 years later in the future, and say that little area is done very well, and there's more malls, and maybe someone put a high rise up in there with 200 units. So who knows? It could be a whole gold rush. And say now, in year 20, all those properties are doing $100,000 of the property tax. Whoa, that would be awesome. Except $99,000 would not be going to the city, would be going to the TIF. And now, so you say, oh my God, so what is all that money doing building up in the TIF piggy bank? Where does it go? What's it being used for? It's being used to pay down the debt that the city incurred in the first place. So when this whole thing gets going, one of the questions is, what are you building inside the TIF district? So maybe we'll hear about that tonight, but whatever that is, it could be a mall, it could be a housing project, it could be multiple things. Where's the money coming from to give the developers? If it's not already in the TIF, well, it can't be because it's just being created. They're going to have to take out a loan. And they meaning the city of Evanston. So Tom Tresser Development wants that $3 million, as you're promising me for my TIF, but Evanston doesn't have it ready to go. So they'll go to the Bank of Evanston and they'll take a note. Give me my $3 million. And then every year we got to pay that note down plus interest. Now,
You have to, or the city's doing it?
the city is paying the note.
Okay.
They're collecting the property taxes and paying that note. Now, another project comes along a few years that has nothing to do with Tom Tresser's mall. It's a whole nother thing, but it's in the TIF district boundaries. They could fund that with that money. And it just requires the city council's approval. So the mayor may propose it, or the person who runs the economic development program, your department, may propose that, but in the end, the council has to bless it. So that's how it goes. That's what TIFs are. And the question that we have, I think that's a public policy question, is under what circumstances do we give public money that should be going to run our schools, our fire department, our libraries, our parks? When do we give that to a private person? Because that's what we're doing. And are there any losers in this process? And is it all open and above board? Where are the conflicts of interest? Where are the fail safes? So like if it's a bogus project that just doesn't pan out, where can we call a halt? lots of questions like that, in terms of evaluating it beforehand, during, and after. Now, there's a problem that we'll notice, not just in Evanston, but all over the country. In COVID, TIFs have been rushed through the process so that people who have objections and questions are shut out. So I don't know if that's the case here. You guys can testify to that if you have a good, robust public process for your government. But in many, many places across the country, especially in times of COVID, they push this thing through. You got lots of people, on Zoom calls who can't speak, and it just gets pushed through. So we see a lot of that, and that's a caution. So that's the basics. I hope that's a good way to get the thing going here.
Tom, to address the development plan, do the TIFs that you have seen, do they have a development plan that is specific, or is it more just general ideas?
Yeah, I know. We've seen both. So in some cases, in the proposals that the developers or the city staff people are putting out, the project is named, and it's, and you can see sketches and even budgets. The line items are very, very broad. Like it'll say, like relocation costs or construction costs, acquisition, legal fees, professional fees, and interest, very, very broad. And maybe there'll be some named thing, but oftentimes you'll see it just says for development. And there may be some very broad line items as well. And so what that tells me is that the people proposing the TIF know exactly what's happening. They know exactly what they want to build. They know who the developer is. We don't know. Now, when you FOIA that and you attempt to say, well, let's just hold the horses here until we get more clarity. Please put all your cards on the table, City of Evanston or City of Rochester, New York. What are you proposing to use our money for? And what you get is it's a private, it's a competitive thing. We can't tell you because the competitors will then know things about this project. So you'll hear that. I don't know if that's the case with this project.
Well, I'll let Bobby address it. I mean, what I've read is nothing specific, but I want to ask some other questions because about the, we've talked back and forth about how money is used. And one of the issues that I've had with the TIFs in general is that it's very hard to track the millions of dollars that goes through them and how they've gotten paid. And so I know at one point you helped us look at our Evanston TIFs going back a number of years. So since they started, there's been $185 million go through it. And at the bottom of any given year, there may be $2 or $5 million going through it. But we don't know where that money actually went. How would you find it?
Well, that's a great question. And with the two city council people on the call, hopefully they will be interested in, helping us to answer that question. So all the annual reports, so by law, each TIF must file a document at the end of the year with a lot of information in it, including a balance sheet. And Illinois is good there. Many states don't require that, but Illinois is good that if you operate a TIF, your city must send this document to Springfield and then put it hopefully on their website. And so what we need is the annual reports for every year that the TIFs existed. So there were 8 TIFs in Evanston up to the present time. TIFs 1, 2, 3, and 4 are now dead. They're no longer present, but they were around. The first one being the Downtown or Research Park TIF that started in 1985 and went all the way to 2009. Then there was the Southwest TIF that went from 1990 to 2014. Then there was the Howard Hartley TIF from 1992 to 2016. And then the Washington National TIF from 1994 to 2018. So those are the 4 TIFs that you will not see on the TIF map, right? Because they're gone. but we have to know about them because they were around for so long and they took so much money. The 4 TIFs that are operating presently in Evanston are the Howard and Ridge TIF, started in 2004, the West Evanston TIF in 2005, the Dempster and Dodge TIF in 2012, and the Chicago and Maine TIF from 2013. And what is on the table now would be, I guess, TIF number 9, so-called 5/5 TIF. That would be mostly in Mr. Burns's ward. So what we tried to do, Mary, in response to you and your colleagues, we try to get our handle on all the history of TIFs. However, that's 143 reporting years. In other words, all the TIFs times all the years, you know, they were in operation, right, is 143 annual reports we should have, or you should have. However, we only have 106. So we're missing 26% of the TIF reports. So we don't know the answer to a lot of questions. What we do know is that all the TIFs in Evanston cumulatively have sucked out $187.4 million.
Yeah.
That's what happened. That we know. How it was used, we don't know.
So this particular,
yeah.
I'm sorry, Bobby, go ahead.
No, there's a lot here. In time, I've had the pleasure of taking one of your workshops in Chicago. I was telling Mary the other day, I've done a lot of political consulting work in Chicago, especially among the activist community, and was well of your work before today. So thank you for finding some time to help us out here. There's a lot to unpack here. So subsidizing private development, I'm really interested to have you unpack that in the context of Chicago, because there's like a micro enterprise, right? Private developer, a small kind of mom and pop, small mid-sized company. And then there's a, you know, and then there's a much larger company, right? That has holdings that only a small company could imagine. So it'd be interesting to have you unpack what type of private development in Chicago is Chicago subsidizing, and are there opportunities through TIF to support micro enterprises, small family-owned neighborhood shops, and starting up their businesses in blighted communities, right? We have to use that term. And then you know, you also talked about, could it be done through conventional lending? And it sounds as though the way you're framing it, access to lending is the only barrier. And I can think of a few more. I think there's a reason why, even if you look at how TIFs, one way TIFs can be used is costs of eliminating or removing contaminants and other impediments. That's a big one when you consider brownfield sites, which we have one not in this TIF district, but in the neighboring TIF district, and we know money can be ported in order to support TIF projects. But that could be a barrier to a developer of any size if there's a significant financial cost of remediating a brownfield site. So I think there's, and I won't go down the list, but I think there's some other barriers besides just going to a bank and them saying, you know what, we won't lend to you. And then also they are still going to a bank to get a portion of the development costs lent to them. So there's still a bank involved, but it'd be interesting to unpack that a bit. And, you know, TIFs also can be used for, you know, kind of general financing and public infrastructure improvements. So including streets, sewer, water, and so on and so forth. So I think it'd just be interesting to unpack again what type of developers and the size of developers that Chicago has decided to mainly support. What are some of the other barriers to improving communities that are in the early stages of redevelopment, and how can TIF be used to support smaller, again, more micro enterprises? And then also after that, wanted to touch on the full context of TIFs in Chicago, because we're talking about an area that doesn't have an elected school board, We're talking about an area that has over 50 aldermen. We're talking about an area that has, I think, 136 active TIFs. Please correct me if I'm wrong, which is about 2.7 per ward, where I think we have 4 active TIFs in Evanston. So I think it is also would be useful to really define the context in which TIF exists in Chicago. You know, they annually get rated one of the most corrupt and politically corrupt places on earth, right? And so I'm with you on a lot of the stuff you talk about in Chicago, and certainly want to learn more about how we can make sure we don't run into those same issues here. Sorry for being lengthy, but I just wanted to put a few things out there.
Thank you, Councilman. Many good points. However, before I respond, I want to also take a larger frame. I asked under what circumstances do we give public money to private individuals? We haven't addressed that, and I think you should address it and do it in your own way in good time. The second question is, what is the proper role of the city in economic development? Again, I'll betray my bias by saying, by doing the things that only a city can do, which again takes me back to public. So the better your public is, the better your city is, the more attractive it is to live and to work. So for me at the Civic Lab, we kind of reject the frame that you're offering, Councilman, is like and I want to answer your questions, but I also want to say I push back and I sort of reject them at the same time, if you follow me. Because for us, the way that the only things that a city can do, it should do, like run a public school system, run a public transportation system, operate parks, operate free Wi-Fi, operate things of that nature, public housing, public health clinics, things of this nature that are not for profit, that are for the public's good. That's the proper use of your energy and our public money. But when you go down the TIF path, the city is now forced to place a bet, and it's really guided by clouded lawyers and insiders who are guiding the hose of public money where it should be sprayed. And you're right, Chicago is the most corrupt city in America by many counts. So, and naturally, anything that's going to happen inside the city is going to be corrupted. And that is a true thing. TIFs reflect, it's like a Rorschach test. If your city is corrupt, your TIFs will be corrupt. If your city is high and mighty and very good and transparent, and there's excellent democracy and accountability, the chances of the TIFs being corrupted are not as high, but we still believe them to be an improper use of public money. All right, now I'll get to your questions. Yeah, Chicago's corrupt. We've got 140 TIFs that took $680 million off the table. So it's clearly a beast of it by itself that dwarfs, obviously, any other discussion. However, the principles remain the same. We believe TIFs are corrupting and racist, and they cannot be remedied. Now, the other point you mentioned was, well, there are other barriers to investment like pollution that might prevent. So back to what a city can do. If the city wants to remediate brownfields, and that's in the same ballpark as replacing lead pipes, like Flint, Michigan is facing, and many municipalities are facing. That's not an area for private enterprise. That would be inappropriate for the city to say, Mary and Bobby, you guys it's on you. You can hire a contractor and dig it up and put in the lead pipes, and if you got the money, good for you. If you don't, no, that is not. So it would be an appropriate use of public money to go to the bond market and say, what would it cost to replace all the lead pipes in a city like Evanston? It's $200 million. I just made up that number. Okay, we don't have that. So how are we going to raise it? Okay, let's go to the bond market. We'll take out the bonds and we'll ask the taxpayers, all the taxpayers, to pay according to their situation. So Tom Tresser is a little wealthier. He's going to pay an extra $200 a year for 5 years. But Tricia over the other side of town, she's got so much wealth, she's going to pay an extra $50 a year for 5 years. And that's how we do it. And it's a conversation that we have across our city. And it could be that I don't even need my pipes replaced, but I'm okay with my extra, because it's part of the body politics. It's all discussed and everyone's going to benefit. You know what I'm saying? That's the kind of thing that a city does big time. But putting a mall on 110th Street owned by Mary, you know, that, yes, I'm not against malls. I just don't want public money used for private enterprise under any circumstance. And if we just go down a slippery slope. And so, yes, to answer your question, you could give public money to mom and pops. Yeah, sure. You know, Bob Cruz, dry cleaner, you know, in business for 100 years. He wants to open another store. You could create a fund, but just create it out of the general operating fund. Just put, you know, make that a public debate that says Evanston will start 100 new businesses, 50 by a minority and 50 by non-minority, or whatever. You just, you know, you can create that and say, in order to do that, again, we're going to raise $100 million and we're going to disperse it over 5 years, blah, blah, blah. Here's the application process, right? Everybody sees how it works. The problem with TIF-based development is you're asking people in a poor community to pay for their own improvements, which is racist. It's not fair, right? So here's one of the key features of TIFs, why we call them out. They are anti-distributional. What do I mean by that? Well, the law says that the money collected inside a TIF must stay in the TIF. So if you're going to put a TIF on a community that's poor or struggling or modest, what are you saying? You're saying, we're going to take your own property taxes and use that to bootstrap you, whereas the rich folk 2 miles away, they get to keep their money. So if the TIF is down, if there's a TIF down on the south side or covers the downtown area, which I think one does, that money stays in that TIF zone. And so that's what we call anti-distributional. So you're saying to the poorer people, the people whose houses are not worth that much, or they're worth not as much as the wealthy guys, just wait. You'll eventually, your TIF bucket will fill up and we'll build something with it. That's why we don't like using TIF money to pay for public stuff, like a park or an L stop. Well, you don't, you know, maybe you would build a new L stop in Evanston, who knows? But what you're saying is we can only do that public thing if there's money in the TIF bucket. And there's only money going to be in the TIF bucket if there's wealth there. So what if I'm a poor community? We just don't have a lot of, there's not a big mall in our ward, you know, and the houses are modest, you know, whatever. And you put a TIF on me, I'm never going to get my new fire department if you're going to use TIFs for it. That's why we say, look at the city as a whole and plan accordingly. And these TIF districts are not good for planning. I hope that was responsive.
Tom, that was great. I'm so glad you're on here because I've learned more about TIFs just in the past 30 minutes than I've ever gone to all the city council meetings. I will say, I mean, many believe that we do have a corrupt city council, but I truly have faith in the new council, the new blood on the council that are on there. So I think that as a whole, we have some hope because they're not corrupt. As community leaders, they have not been corrupt. We have so many questions. Everyone, I have a lot of people hit me up for questions.
Sure.
This has been great, Tom. Thank you. And Mary, this is awesome. I'm looking forward to us doing this on a regular basis. I really want the community to be educated because we have been snowed so many times and the rug pulled from up under us, not knowing how these decisions are made. And so this is excellent. The first
And
one.
Malika, real quick, after you get to the questions, if I could respond, I want obviously everybody to get their questions off first, but I just wanted to put.
Okay. We did set it for an hour, but I think we are going to go over because this is, it's important to me that the residents get their questions in, and I definitely want to hear from our council, our new blood that I'm excited about. Darlene Cannon, you are up first.
All right, thank you, Malika. Hi, Tom. I have two questions. With the creation of the Fifth Ward TIF, does that mean that the taxes will increase in that area to begin funding the TIF?
So that's a great question. And the people who push TIFs often say it's like free money.
Right.
You know, it's like magic beans or something. So the first point is, no, it's not free money because the units of local government will be losing all the money they should have gotten if that project was built. And then if you say, well, the project wouldn't have been built, that's where we differ. You know, that's kind of where we and the people who push TIFs just cannot agree. And there's no way for me to prove my point by saying other than that something will happen. And if you're saying we have to bribe you to make it happen, that's where we have the difficulty in terms of TIFs. And we've seen that in Chicago many times. So that's the first point. The other point is TIFs will raise everyone else's taxes. So if you take property tax money off the table, the units of government around here know this game very well. Now they have to figure out their annual budgets every year, given the realities of the Cook County courts and the city of Evanston and the public libraries and all the units of government that are in your domain. And if they are a taxing body, they will know, well, we should be getting so much based on the property values in Evanston or Chicago or what have you. But we know that 30%, in the case of Chicago, it's 34% of the land is under a TIF. So they have to sort of adjust their thinking. And what that means is the tax rates rise over the years. And according to the Cook County Assessor's Office, they did some research a few years ago. What they said was, if you made all the TIFs go away in Cook County, your property tax bill would go down 11%. So so what they're saying is the collective pressure, inflationary pressure of these TIFs over the decades has slowly inched up the tax rates across the board. Now, for me and my little house here in Chicago, knowing what I pay in property taxes, if you would tell me, Tom, we're going to go back 20 years, that's how long I've been here, and we're going to give you your property tax times 10%, and we're going to give you a check, I'll buy my boat. You know what I'm saying? I'll buy my summer home. You know what I'm saying? I'll send my nephew to college on that. So.
Just a second part to that is that, so I want to make sure that we'll just comment that what you're saying is that the taxes will increase. So if TIFs are in blighted areas, we're going to now tax those people and have them fund a TIF.
Well, let's be clear, the taxes don't go up. It's just your property tax.
Property taxes, rather.
Right. So if Darlene, say you live in the 5th Ward right now, for sake of argument, and say you own a house and you pay $5,000. That's what you're paying today on your house. That's the property tax you pay to Cook County, right? You look at your property tax bill and you see all the line items, whatever it is, 9, 10, units of government, and you're satisfied. You say, okay, Board of Ed, 67%. I got children, I got grandchildren, that's cool. Or you may say, no, I don't have any children, but I still am down with that, and so on. That's your bill. If you're unhappy, you got to move, right? Because that's the cost of living in Evanston. Now the TIF comes to you and your house goes up in value, and next year your property tax bill is $6,000. The $5,000 still goes to the units of government, but that's that new $1,000 that goes into the TIF pot. So it's not as if your taxes were raised arbitrarily. That's right. Just the value, and so your property tax is going to go up because your house is worth more. It's just that $1,000 won't find its way to the units of government, and you will not be asked your opinion about that. So every year and all your neighbors were the same. That $1,000 from you and $2,000 from your neighbors all goes into the TIF bucket. And you may think, if you're not paying attention, it could be a few years from now, and you say, oh, my tax bill is $7,000. It was only $5,000 a few years ago. Wow. But what's going on here? I still am waiting 40 minutes for the bus.
Right.
I'm saying my park is not as good as it should. It's because those units of government aren't getting the money you're paying because of the TIF. Okay.
And I think somebody else might ask this too, but one thing that I noticed that in the TIF, it says something about eminent domain. is eminent domain, I was told by the city that eminent domain has to be in the TIF. Is that true?
Well, as far as I know, the eminent domain powers can be exercised according to the city under a set of rules that have nothing to do with the TIF. So they could be doing two things at the same time. You know, if there's something in property court, or what do you call it, tax court, or some owner is a delinquent, you know, and it's an unsafe property, they could take that owner to court and wrest that property from them and demolish it. You know, they have a separate process for that.
Malika, can I jump in real quick and say something? And I just wanted to make a note of this, that there's a reason why I talked about how Chicago doesn't have an elected school board, because while in Evanston, we have two separate units of government, right? District 65 and 202, who can negotiate that can negotiate how much tax increment will leave those units of government. Chicago doesn't, right? And so I do think that's a benefit that that we have here in Evanston that Chicago just doesn't have. And I know, again, activists have been fighting for an elected school board for years there, but we do have that. And again, what I mean by that is there's a joint review board meeting between all the taxing bodies. We just had a meeting, right? And we have representatives from District 65 and 202, and those are an opportunity for them to negotiate, right? How much increment leaves those individual taxing bodies. And right. real quick, please. And then the other thing I want to say is, just to give it proper context, is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Chicago public schools on average is about $13,000 expenditure per pupil, where in Evanston, District 65 gets about $16,400 and spends about $16,422 per pupil. And District 202 is off the charts. We're number 13 in Illinois in terms of what we spend per pupil. So again, I think it's important to understand the context. When we're talking about money leaving those other units of government, one, they have the ability to negotiate what increment goes away from them, but also our schools are in much better financial position than Chicago is. And then the third thing I want to say before Councilman Reid steps in is that I also think we can't separate the importance of in trying to make sure that we're improving academic outcomes. We can't separate the need for underdeveloped communities to be developed, or areas that lack resources and opportunity to get resources and opportunity. And we can't separate the need for that from what happens in the school itself. And so I know, for the sake of an argument, sometimes those two things seem detached, but it's important that we're improving our public facilities and our public infrastructure, whether it's through TIF or another means, while at the same time the district is working on curriculum and other things that are going to lead to improvements. But it's all the same thing. So I don't want to, I don't want folks to get confused to make it seem like these two things are separate. It's the same thing. We have to figure out a way to improve both at the same time.
And can you address too, Tom, because we do have a capital improvements budget for the things you were saying we do. And I was at that joint board of review meeting and I didn't hear any negotiation. So maybe if you know, did they negotiate something? Because their budget goes up whether or not they get TIF dollars or not. And if that TIF dollar gets directed right to the TIF, then the school budget still needs to be
right. Yeah, I just want to chime in. I just wanted to correct that one part of the record, which is that the districts don't get to negotiate what increment leaves the district, because no one knows what the increment's going to be. What they do get to negotiate, or not really even negotiate, they get a non-binding vote as to whether the TIF should exist or not. But that's what the power that the districts have through that joint review board. It's similar to many other committees that can reject a proposal, but when it comes forward to council has the ability to unilaterally accept or deny a TIF district. So the school board, the school districts don't have a vote on that.
Well, you raise a really important point, Councilman.
I disagree with that. I talked to Paul Dominic really quickly, and he said that the district can decide the percentage that leaves their unit of government if they speak up. And Tom, if that's not true, please correct the record and we can look at the statute. But I disagree with that. I was told that that's not the case, that they can speak up.
Question
Well,
is, did they?
So you guys raise a very crucial point about the sort of the insider baseball of TIFs. And the realpolitik of this is school boards and school board superintendents have to accommodate their mayor or city manager because they work with them all the time. And even though school board CFOs know that TIFs hurt their finances, they don't want to go to war with their mayor. So there's often these backroom deals that are lead to memos of understanding or whatever you want to call it. And it's in the record all across the country. The question I have is, do the parents know about this? Do the taxpayers understand this give and take? So here's what happened in Oak Park, and not too far away, on the other side of the city, a few years ago. The mayor of Oak Park wanted a TIF for a mall in the heart of the city. And he went to the school superintendent and said, look, don't mess me on this. I'm gonna give you some money back channels. So we'll sign a memo. And every year the city of Oak Park will send the school district 200 so much money. And they signed that. And then a few years go by and there's a new board, a new superintendent come in, and they do look at their books and they go, wait a minute, something's not right here. And it turns out the city is shorting them. They're not giving them what they should be getting. And the Board of Education sues the mayor of Oak Park. So now you have the embarrassing situation of the taxpayer on both sides of the deal. They're defending and prosecuting. And they spent $400,000 in legal fees in 1 year until they settled. What an embarrassment. I mean, that's a fire truck, right? That's like, how many school positions is that? And so we see this all over the country. And having an elected school board is not a guarantee that it's going to be an open and above board process. It's up to the city council, I would say. And it's up to the parents groups to do your due diligence. Don't bet on anything. And what I found, and I'm sad to report this, is oftentimes the school superintendent who does serve at the pleasure of an elected board may not even tell his board members what's going on. And so I find many articles of city council meetings from all over the country in which a Board of Education member is kind of a lone wolf taking the mic to protest the TIF, and his voice is drowned out. So I have yet to see in these tax meetings of the Joint Review Board, I have yet to see a TIF turned down. It has never happened. So usually by the time it gets to the Joint Review Board, it's a done deal. And that's not okay. So, but the statute doesn't demand anything more. It demands a public meeting, which you can check off. You don't have to actually listen to anybody in the public meeting. You know what I'm saying? So what we would like to see is, if there's going to be TIFs, we'd like to see a robust public forum. So if it's going to be in your ward, Bobby, then, however many people you can get to a church or online or whatever, however you want to meet, and have it out and let all the cards on the table and let the people decide on the pluses and minuses. And if the people with the full deck of cards say, you know what, this sounds like a good deal to us. Okay, fine. Divert the taxes and do the thing, for 20 years, 23 years. That has never happened in the history of the world. Maybe you'll be the first. I hope so.
Yeah, I mean, I know Chicago well, and I know that they have completely, they have a very broad definition of what blighted means, right? And I think part of what you said about there being, the pressure that comes from all these TIF districts is what raises taxes, which is why having 2.7 per ward, which Chicago has, is just untenable, right? It's not sustainable at all. Whereas, again, Evanston, when you consider the fact that, real quick, Devon, please, when you consider the fact that both of our school districts are pretty well funded, right? Public bodies always are going to ask for more money, but I would argue that I think, I'm not even going to get into that, but public bodies always ask for more money. But when you compare them to other districts in the country, they're doing pretty well. And so my thing is, like, I am very much so interested in in using TIF in the way that I think it was originally intended, in that it was about blighted communities and not blighted parcels, right? And so when I look at how Chicago spends it, they spend it for largely blighted parcels. And the communities that really need it don't get it, either because there's no TIF there. If the TIF is there, it's like what you said, Tom, earlier, that they're not producing enough increment, right? So then there's no money in the TIF. And I just wanted to say that in this census tract that we're talking about now, the income is $44,000 median household income. That's about 3/5 the amount of Evanston and about 2/3 the amount of Cook County. The poverty level is 28% persons below the poverty line. That's more than double the rate of Evanston, and it's about double the rate of Cook County. I mean, I can keep going. Household value, like this is an area that I think TIF was intentionally meant to support. And then places like Chicago and other places have really, and Evanston to a certain degree, have really corrupted the original intent. And so my thing is once the TIF, there's an opportunity where we can finally get TIF in a war where this community really should have gotten it first. Now there's this push to figure out another way to fund it. If we could figure out another way to fund it, great. But what I know for sure is that there are people like Bobby Pascal, who's on Dewey, who's an auto mechanic, who is looking to get a hold of a parcel of land that he's looking to do a swap with the city. That's a whole nother thing. But they're interested in helping him do something that is well within TIF, which is they want to help him with, I think it was architectural drawings and architectural drawings. Here it is, professional services such as architectural, engineering, legal, and financial planning. That is an eligible TIF use for a business owner that has been probably working in the Fifth Ward for 10, 15, 20 years. Eligible TIF use can also go to support Jennifer Edibles as well as her landlord to do improvements. And so that's why, Tom, I asked you early on if we could come up as a community with a list of improvements, right? Of the things that we would like to see invested in the community. Is that a good start? I know you're a TIF abolitionist and somebody that just doesn't support it fundamentally, which I respect. But if we could come up with a list, right, of things that the community really wanted invested in and improved, as well as making sure that there's a greater level of transparency and public engagement and accountability, is that at least a good start?
Well, I'm often asked questions like that, Bobby. Give me an example of a good TIF. No, it's so we don't. There's an old saying. It feels awkward for me to quote it in this space, but you can't take down the master's house with the tools the master built. So if the desire is to help people by giving them property or straight out cash for their business, just do that. Just have a program and fund it from the general fund. Put it in your budget and write up the specs and put it in the general operating budget so everyone can see what the process is. And so everyone will pay for it, not just the people in the Fifth Ward, but the whole city of Evanston will contribute to such thing. That's how I believe it should be done. So yes, is there a need in your ward for the gentleman and the lady that you talked who have been ignored, have been discriminated against, and we have to, and we're desperate to try to find a way to help those good people? Yes, I'm with you 100% there. I just differ with you on the mechanism, and it's something that you guys have the power to try. So maybe you will break the ice and find a way to make what I find to be an unpalatable program work for the good of people. It would be newsworthy. Let me tell you that, because people all across the country have been screwed by these TIFs by the hundreds of billions of dollars. So you may be onto something. So I won't totally shut you down, but I'm just saying I'm very skeptical. Let's just put it that way. be honest with you. I'm just very skeptical, but you seem like someone who's got a good heart. And so maybe you guys can wrestle with this thing. That's the best I can say.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. Go ahead, Malik.
I was going to see if Alderman, I was saying thank you for that. That was some good discussion right there. Something to definitely think about. I wanted to get Alderman Reid in there, and then we've got residents lining up with questions. We are gonna
go to the resident questions. I was just going to point out that the city of Evanston is about the size of a Chicago ward, and the fact that we have 4 TIFs, that's a decent percentage of our city in a TIF district. Particularly when you factor that into all of the land loss to and the tax revenue loss to nonprofits. So it is fairly significant.
And I think we have like 40 or 50% of our land is off the tax rolls right away. So it's,
Yeah, and I think there's only 2 eligible communities, maybe 3, that should have them in the first place. And I just want to make that clear. There are TIFs that exist today that if I was on the council, I would not support. Let's just be very clear on that. And I read you the demographics of the community that this TIF is going in, right? And it is on the mark in terms of, I think, what this was originally intended for. But please, let's get.
Okay, we're going to open this up to the residents. We are going to go over. Tom said he is happy to stay and answer questions. We have Meg Welch. Is she still with us? Meg?
Yes, I'm here. So my question is related to what Bobby just said. And that is, I know that, for example, Chicago, Maine is a TIF. And to me, it seems slightly absurd that Chicago, Maine is a TIF. We had Benny's clamoring to get in when Whole Foods left. It's not, the median income in a radius around there is quite high. And so I'm just curious if anyone knows Evanston history, like who, and it's not clear to me who decides where a TIF goes and how that one was decided. But then also, Tom, if you could just make sure, I'd like to make sure I understand what you said about the property taxes increase. My understanding based on what you said is that when a TIF starts, it's not like property taxes are not going to increase dollar to dollar because, based on the amount of the new, the improvement value in the property. It's what happens is that since counties and cities don't have that money, they have to find the money somewhere else, and that tax gets raised. And then over time, it does add a little bit more tax to property taxes, because when the assessor looks at it and it's like, well, this is the money we have coming in and this is what it's really worth, there's like a gap and they have to do something about it. But it's not like, okay, so now there's a new TIF and then property taxes skyrocket. That's not my understanding anyway.
You're right. Right. So,
Okay.
yeah, so the TIF scrapes property taxes that are being collected. So if the TIF isn't there, the property taxes generated by the properties in an area flow to the units of government according to the law. So I think what was said is your Board of Ed gets collectively about a little south of 70%, and so on. And again, it's connected also, sadly, to the regressive nature of Illinois' overall income tax. So this Illinois has one of the most regressive tax systems in America. So therefore, all the cities in Illinois rely heavily on property taxes for local government, which is again racist and unfair, because a child that is born in a poor community, his schools or her schools are just not going to be as top notch as the child's from a school 10 miles away where there's a mall and homes are worth $1 million. It's just not right. But Illinois has a crappy income tax. And so that's another reason why TIFs are so pregnant in this state, and they're in 49 states. So yeah, you were right about that, Meg. If you live in a TIF, it's not like your taxes go up. in some way, whereas the guy 5 blocks away doesn't. No, you have the same situation. Your house is worth what it's worth, and the TIF will scrape the new value, whatever the increment is.
Okay, anyone know the Evanston history about, like, for example, Chicago, Maine got to be a TIF? I was just wondering, any aldermen know, anybody?
I was just looking that up today. I'm gonna have to get back to you about it. I just started doing a little research on that. And it doesn't seem like it was a but for. It was that they couldn't find any other funding. I think it was, I'd have to look at it, and I'll get back to you on that. But I want to be clear too, I was not on the council at that time.
Right, that question is often asked. We've done 180 public meetings since 2013. And often people say, well, how did these things get created in the first place? Like, why do they look the way they look? They're all jaggedy and all over the place. That's a good question, and that's a question for your Department of Planning. So if you want to bring someone from your Department of Planning on your call, Malik, and ask them, like the art and science of drawing TIF districts. Now, in some parts of our cities, there's high rises, obviously. And so if there's 100 units in a high rise, and each unit is worth $400,000, obviously that building is throwing off a lot of property taxes. But if you go 5 miles or 2 miles away, and it's all single family homes of modest value, and you want to create a TIF district there, you might have to have a very large district, to capture the value that you need. Whereas in some parts of our cities, the TIFs are very small, but they have hundreds of millions of dollars sitting in them, which is the case in Chicago.
Thank you for that question, Meg. I'm going to call on Tricia, but I know Betty has the answer to Meg's question, but we'll call on Betty after Tricia. I have Tricia next. Tricia Connolly.
Hi, thanks Malika for hosting this. And actually, if Betty wants to go, I'll wait. It'll be more in flow.
Okay. Betty, you still with us here? There she is.
I did that and didn't lose the picture. Good evening, everybody, and thanks, Malika, for this. And Tricia, if you remember, the Chicago TIF came into play because they said there was no opportunities and things for business to develop. It was a depressed area in terms of business being developed, and that they really couldn't be developed there without some assistance from the city, because there was infrastructure that had to be done that the developer could not pay for. So if you look at how the lines and stuff was drawn for that, it include all of the new development. And so that's how that got done. So like the TIF in the state law, I encourage you to read the state law. That whole deal, it is long, but it will tell you everything you need to know about a TIF. And that developing an economic area is one of the permitted things. So they looked at it, they talked about it, the neighbors did have meetings and everything. And the one thing that they kept asking their alderman, well, when do the community get a chance to speak? And they said, well, we had the public meeting. And they said, but the community, we need to pull the community together. One thing that Evanston have done, and it became a precedent here in Evanston, that they have community meetings on their TIFs before they are developed. They did it back in 2005, kind of with the blessing of the planning department, because when they had to bring the changes and the amendment through the planning department, and the planning department board looked at it and say, what did the people in the community have to say on this? We spoke, we got petition, they didn't listen to us, and the TIF went forward. And so that TIF went forward. So when they do a TIF here in the community, here in Evanston, and if the residents ask for a community meeting, they give them that community meeting to have that input, to help them to understand and try to figure out, why are you doing it over here? Like the people over there on Chicago Avenue was saying, this is not a blighted area. True. So then they somewhat explained about the economic development and to help bring economic income and stuff to the area. So that's why they did. And I talk later, so she can go back. I'll give back to Tish. And then I'll tell you all the other questions I have later.
Thank you so much, Betty. Thank you. Thank you.
So that's how Main Street came about.
All right. All right.
Can I, one thing that I don't remember Tom hitting on it, and I think Bob had Alderman Burns asked that they developing a new TIF in the 5th Ward. And that TIF is abutting the existing TIF. So you have to be careful with the city and them putting up TIFs, because when the TIFs start abutting each other, they can loop them into the same TIF. And all of a sudden you got one big giant area of TIFs. Correct? Thank you.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
Just to give real quick, just to give, oh, go ahead, Tom, I'll go after you.
Yes, that's called, Ms. Esther, that's called porting. And in Chicago, as I say, they collected 685 million last year, and about a little less than half of it was moved around.
Right.
So it's a shell game inside of a shell game that, again, is not doesn't have to be reported, or explained. It could be a footnote, but but the TIF that you guys are contemplating is going to be budgeted for $89 million. So I guess the question is, over the 23-year license, what are they going to spend the $89 million for? So if you're satisfied with where that money is going to go, and does any of that include financing fees? And I'm sure it does. So again, if the city's taking out a note to fund the TIF, part of that 89 million, and it could be as high as 20 to 25%. So you're shipping money to Wall Street. And didn't we already give them enough money, from the financial bailouts? That's one of the little secret that TIFs bring to us. But anyway, if Alderman Burns is correct that development can't happen without it, then you could say the schools aren't going to suffer. They're doing, as you're asserting, they're doing well, and your kids are prospering, and the schools seem to be working for everybody. If that's the case, they're not going to miss the 89 million. On the other hand,
no, that's not my point.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that you have what happens in the classroom, but also what happens in the neighborhood that contributes to the academic success of a student. And so what I said is, I think both of those things need to be happening simultaneously, right? Really good curriculum, good teachers, racial equity and other processes built into our educational system and institutions here in Evanston, as well as developing the neighborhoods that the kids come from. one of those things could be building a new school. I know in 2012 or 2015, there was a report that I read that said, I think Chicago had spent $840 million of TIF money on schools, right? So there's a conversation in our community about a school in the 5th Ward, which is the ward we're talking about, right? A ward that has been historically overlooked for investment, a ward that has had nearly every institution stripped from it over the years. And so TIF can be used to support the construction of a school. You know, this big scary idea of port, right, is what we see in Chicago, where neighborhood, you know, a neighborhood on the south or west sides that doesn't, you know, that has a high poverty level, right? They're porting money from that. But in the 5th Ward, what it can be used for is to port money from the 5/5 TIFs to the west area, whatever it's called, TIF, to remediate a brown site that's contaminated in the back of public storage, right? So my point is that if we name what it is we're trying to use this money for as a community, and we do that thing, right? We do that investment, like that's what we're doing. It's not Chicago, this big, scary city of Chicago with 50 aldermen, with 136 TIFs. Like, we're a small area. We can wrap our heads around everything that's going on. We can decide how we want these public funds to be used and ensure it's used in that way.
You know, I want to pop in here just 1 second, because I don't disagree in the need that's there, but this TIF has already gone past the Joint Board of Review, and we don't know what it is involved. And that, I guess, is why I wanted to start this discussion, to slow this down, because Bobby, you bring up good questions, and we've talked, you know how important neighborhood schools are to me, right? And so, but it's also the school district responsibility. So that's taking a bunch of ours. And maybe we haven't even talked about the fact that maybe a neighborhood school, maybe we don't need another magnet school. Maybe Walker stays, maybe Bessie Rhodes sells. Maybe the money from the Bessie Rhodes goes into the new school, and maybe we don't, you know, do a TIF district, but that what you're talking about is genuine. This is the first that I think anyone has really heard some other alternatives about what's really going on behind the doors. And that's what we want. That's what I want. I want to know, you know, because I'm looking at that plan that they did, and I think it's on page 24, is talking about whatever page it is, you know, $10 million for this and $29 million for this and whatever. But where does that all break down? And then where do we get to say yes or no? You know, as a public, we need to have that before it just gets passed on and say, we're going to do it. Because I think a lot of people will agree with what you're saying. But I also agree with Tom that if a city, that ward has been neglected forever. And it's time for the city to put the same kind of economic development money into your ward as they have other places, TIF or no TIF.
Yeah. If I can just chime in, that's my exact point. One, I, of course, trust Alderman Burns and his discernment, and the new council's discernment, my own as a voting member, to ensure that, you know, as a TIF is used in the ward, that it's, you know, every expenditure while we're in office is a responsible expenditure that has plenty of public input and uses the money properly. You know, I would not be voting to give a dime to a large corporate entity like Benny's or Trader Joe's or any other large business like that. And I don't suspect Alderman Burns that his proposal is to give money to those. And so I know it's for the schools, it's for the local businesses, and those are things that I support. But as Mary said, as Tom said, the real question is, you know, should the entire city pitch in money to support those services rather than, you know, as the term Tom used, you know, the 5th Ward having to lift itself up by its bootstraps in order to get the amenities that every other community has, and we're supported by the entire community.
And real quick, I think if we figure out a way to do that, that is guaranteed in the same way that it's guaranteed that you have to use TIF money in the encompassed boundary, right? And there's no way we can, as far as I understand, that we can require general fund money to be used in a specific area to the tune of, I think he said, $80-something million. So again, I'm totally fine with looking at alternatives, but I'm looking for something that we can count on as a ward, because we have not been able to count on that investment.
But now we have you.
Yes, yes.
I'm one vote, Mary. I may sound confident, but I know the realities. I need 4 people with me, and that's not a guarantee. So
Yes, yes. I know we don't have time for much longer. I wanted to get Trisha Connolly in. She's been waiting so patiently.
It's all good. This is a really incredible conversation. So thank you all. So I guess, this kind of, I think, echoes what some people are getting at. And, the thing with the TIF, it's like, you kind of watch it from the sideline, what goes on in Chicago. And it seems like there's never a choice, right? It's like, this is the golden thing that's going to bring us home. And there's never something on the other side about, well, if we don't do a TIF, this is how it could look otherwise, right? So that we're not, scraping off the top. So that if we're going to build a school, it is, public as in public. We're not privatizing anything. I think about, something that's kind of been quieted down lately, but this Fifth Ward library. Libraries are anchors. If our city had the willingness to just get on it and like really get ready, and maybe that's happened and maybe I've missed the conversation. I haven't seen anything very specific yet. But if we were to really focus our energy on getting an anchor in the Fifth Ward, and then really consider what would be developed around that anchor and help local businesses and people who are so invested in this community and have been in the Fifth Ward, to me, that would be incredible. Because, as Tom said, with a TIF, things can get further and further out of reach. Like, who is the developer? Who is coming in to own the land, right? This is also about who gets to own land. And I really fear, this situation where people get to come in and do some grabbing. And yeah, I mean, Bobby, and I admire, and I know that you want to do right by the ward and represent. But I think these are real questions that we need to ask. And I think even letting people imagine and come up with some ideas that, what if we didn't do a TIF? What would it look like? That would be my thing. The other thing is, Bobby, you're in office now, but this thing lasts 23 years. What does that mean? What do we have coming down the pike? And so that is a concern to me too. Thank you.
And real quick, because I'm sorry, Tom, but the Fifth Ward is coming up a lot. So I have to, but I want to hear from you. I want to go to that privatizing. So when I say you can build a school, I'm not saying that, and Tom can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm right on this. When I say pay to build a school, that doesn't mean that a private company would now own the land in the school. It just means literally an eligible TIF use is paying a contractor to construct a school. And so I want to be clear on that, as well as job training is another TIF eligible use. And so that's why I started off the conversation by saying, look, I think we all understand how big, corrupt, whatever. I'm saying that broadly speaking, Chicago uses TIF, but what I would like to do is continue to educate people on the other eligible uses, right? And the original intent, which was not to develop blighted parcels, but to really use this as a way to drive investment into communities, right? Whole neighborhoods that need it, not blighted parcels, which it's really kind of devolved into. So I just want to be clear on that. Eligible TIF use is job training. That's not paying a developer to be trained, in workforce development. That's training someone from our community right here in Evanston in job training. That is the eligible TIF use.
Tom, did you want to respond? Tom?
Hi, I think we've had an amazing conversation here that you have unleashed, and it's a very stimulating one. It's very rare. In fact, I'd say it's unprecedented to have two sitting aldermen in this conversation and well-informed and robust conversation. It's a credit to this body that you guys are willing to engage in this way. And I just think that's awesome, and more power to you. You can set a big example for all the cities. There are over 530 municipalities in the state of Illinois that have TIFs. And believe me, it doesn't look like what you're talking about. It's all done in the secret, middle of night, no citizen input, all kinds of conflicts of interest where people receive TIF money, give money, campaign contributions in buckets to the mayor and the local alderman. It's that way most places. So this is an awesome conversation you guys are having. I hope that you will continue it, and we'll be happy at the Civic Lab to participate as you see fit. I put some links into the chat, including the graphic, the famous triangle graphic that you can grab. It's a Word document. You can download it and use it as a coloring book for your kids. Also, there's a link in the chat. We are giving away the 2019 TIF report for Chicago. So that is information that no one else has. If you want a copy, just click on that link and tell us a few things and we'll send it to you. So that's what I got to say, folks. Thank you so much. Thank you, Malika, for
one more question before
convening.
you go. Malika, can I just ask one more question?
Tom has time.
Oh. Give a second, please. Okay, so here's my last question. I have 10, 20 more, but the question I have is there were
Mary, I think you're muted.
okay. The criteria that was presented that says this district meets is just, it's fallacy. And to Bobby's point is that maybe the TIF, if they had outlined it differently, but being in the business of real estate, I can tell you that these criteria that they said they met is not right. And it is appreciating, and there's land that's been sold that I know is under contract that's being developed, and prices have gone nothing but up in that ward, as they have in all of Evanston proportionately. The fact that there's no comprehensive plan, there's 99% of the city that is built was built before the comprehensive plan. I mean, this is almost a joke. And the criteria that there's excessive lot coverage, but in like my ward, there are smaller lots than there are in Claire's ward. And in this ward, there's smaller lots width-wise, but not lengthwise. Like in Bobby's wards, a lot of the lots are longer. So, and we just passed an ADU unit that's going to make all lots in Evanston more condensed. So I'm like, at what point do you go, you know what, you didn't meet any of the criteria, or you only met one of the criteria, you don't get to have a TIF. Who decides that is there someone beyond Evanston that goes and says, this is not a but-for argument?
Yeah, sadly, no, it's a strictly local thing. So I think what this tells you is that you're going to have a part two. And let's get more people on the call. Okay, let's do a TIF town meeting. Let's make it ward by ward or something. I think that the appetite is out there, the need is out there, and as good as the conversation was, there weren't enough people on this for this serious a matter. So let's just make this a seed. Planting a seed. The journey of 1,000 miles, right, starts with a single step. So I think this is a good start. And the Civic Lab will be happy to be part of some civic engagement effort, civic engagement, education, whatever you want to call it, so that everybody who needs to know will know. So that's what I would say to everyone on this call.
Yeah, and close it. I just wanted to say I've also committed. I talked to Ms. Esther about this. That one, we're going to send out a newsletter about TIF. Some general information about TIF with some links so people can self-educate, as well as committed to holding town halls beyond what the city is required to do. We're going to hold additional town halls, and would love for Tom and Mary and Malika and everybody else joining us tonight to come out and let's keep it going.
Oh, yes, most definitely.
And there is a Facebook page started called Evanston TIFs, where anyone can post on questions, things that they have, information, articles, anything that's relevant. I think, you know, just let's get there. Let's get this information out there and have discussion. Thank you so much, Tom and Bobby and Malika and everyone. Clerk Reid, not Clerk Reid, Council Member Reid.
Yes, thank you so much, Tom. Yeah, we're going to do a part 2 to this. Most definitely. There has to be a part 2. We'll make it a town hall, Evanston Live TV, as well as attending Bobby's ward and Devon's ward. And we got to educate everyone, because what's known to happen in Evanston is things will happen and you're trying to get everyone engaged and people are asleep, and then it happens and they're like, wait, what just happened? What just happened? So we're going to make sure that we start pulling everyone in and educating them on what's actually happening. And TIFs was a huge, huge question mark in Evanston. So thank you so much, Tom. Thank you, Mary. Me and Mary have been talking. So, you know, we want to do this.
Malika, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I have a quick question for Tom.
I gotta go. I gotta go,
Yeah,
guys.
we gotta go back.
We're past time. I'm gonna say
Well,
good night, and I'll leave you guys to, if you want to have a conversation amongst yourselves, I'll let you to it. But I'm gonna say good night to you all now.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Bye.
To everyone out there, thank you for joining us. We are live right now on YouTube because Facebook was, I don't know, tripping. It wouldn't allow us to go live tonight, where majority of, you know, our followers are. But it will be on Facebook tomorrow as a recording. So you all can go back and listen and share it with others. And it's on YouTube now. And stay tuned for more. We're going to do more of these discussions. I definitely just want everyone to be educated on these decisions. I think we have new blood on the council that's exciting. And they seem, you know, they want us to be informed, and they're pretty transparent, and I like that. So let's be there. Let's stay engaged. They're opening the door for us, so we need to just walk on in and have some input and know what's happening. But Mary and I have been talking about doing this on a regular basis, so that's what we're going to do. I love Mary. She's always been this person, so absolutely love her. So thank you to everyone for joining us tonight. Stay tuned on Evanston Live TV for the next one. We are going to have a part 2, and you all enjoy your night, and please stay engaged as to what is going on here in Evanston, our beautiful city of Evanston. Yes, yes. All right. Thank you, Trisha. Thank you. Thank you, Betty Esther. There's more to come. Thank you, Bob. Darlene, thank you so much. Fran. Everyone, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.